The PFA Team of the Season for the 22-23 Premier League season has just come out at the end of August. Well, better late than never. If you missed the team, it is Aaron Ramsdale in goal, Ruben Dias, Saliba, John Stones and Kieran Trippier at the back, Rodri, Martin Odegaard and Kevin De Bruyne in midfield, Bukayo Saka, Harry Kane and Erling Haaland up top. And overall, I think it's a pretty good team of the season. Now, there are one or two positions I could nitpick, but overall, I think it's a very good team. And instead of going over what my team of the season would be, I think I'm just going to go over each individual player and talk about why they made this team. So, let's get into it. Starting up top with the PFA Player of the Season, Erling Haaland. And what more can you say about him? Just a monster of a goal scorer who finally got City over the hump and got them the Champions League title. In his first year of the Premier League, he took it by storm, setting the goals record with 36 goals and just being a dominant player that teams had to game plan around. He's a player who we really haven't seen somebody like him with his size, speed, and finishing. And I think the biggest thing is a couple of years ago after the Champions League final between City and Chelsea, where no recognized striker started, there was a bit of a question floated out of if the modern game would just not have number 9s in it. Well, Haaland answered that question with a resounding no, and he deserves his Player of the Year honors. Next is another striker who was a little bit overlooked last season, Harry Kane, who quietly had a 30-goal season. And I think the fact that it was a somewhat quiet 30-goal season really speaks to how good he's been for so long, the consistency that he's displayed, that he can have this goal-scoring tally without it being that big of a deal. Just such a good player for Tottenham, carried them for so long, and he's become a complete player. His assist numbers weren't great last season, but if you watched him, his creativity was always on display, dropping into the midfield and combining there, just a complete player. I'm kind of happy for him that he's moving on to Bayern, where he can have a team that's not completely carried by him, though it is a bit of a shame that he's not going to be able to challenge for Alan Shearer's record. I think people are making the trophies argument a lot, but even without trophies, Harry Kane's legacy is secure, and it's to the point where when you look at all-time great Premier League strikers, I think we can have that conversation with him and Thierry Henry, Alan Shearer, and Wayne Rooney. I think he's that good that he's on there, and he definitely deserves to be on this team this season. If last season was Bukayo Saka's breakout year, this season he established himself as one of the best players in the Premier League. An amazing goal scorer, great at making assists, great at taking on players, and he's cutting in on his left foot from that right-hand side. Such a valuable position. I mean, just to put in perspective, England haven't had a good left-footed player since John Barnes before him and Phil Foden came around. So it should show how rare that is. He's a young player who's only continued to improve year after year. He's looked really strong to start off this season, and I'm expecting him to make another jump, and we might be looking at him as a world-class talent by the end of this season. Another young Arsenal player, Martin Odegaard, and I love when prospects are able to fulfill their potential. Odegaard was signed by Madrid as a teenager, and he's only impressed since then. He was named Arsenal's captain at 23, and he led the squad extremely well. His goal contribution numbers were great with 15 goals and 7 assists, probably good enough to get him into the team this season in its own right, but he really shined in possession where his on-ball ability helped Arsenal dominate opposition. He's another player who's continued to improve year after year. Even when he was at Madrid, barring an injury, he improved every season, and it's kind of scary, this young squad that Arsenal's putting together. We're going to do a couple more players later, but Martin Odegaard and Arsenal look like they're really set for the future. The next midfielder is Kevin De Bruyne, and what a surprise, he led the league in assists again. Last season, he was great with his passing once again. I think he's the best passer in Premier League history, and his partnership with Erling Haaland last year was something special. They had an instant understanding with each other, which led to just so many goal contributions between the two of them. In addition, he was still very good on the ball, helping City dominate possession, and finally got that Champions League title that he's been looking for so long. And with injuries starting to pile up for De Bruyne, he missed a good bit of that Champions League final. He's missing time right now. I think we can take a look back at his time in the Premier League, and when I do that, I think I have him in my all-time Premier League 11. He's that good. His time with Man City has been so dominant. I think he deserves that spot, and just a truly special player. Last midfielder is Rodri, and there are so many good ways to describe Rodri as a player. I think the biggest compliment that I can give him, though, is I believe he's the best defensive midfielder that Pep Guardiola has ever coached, and that is a good list of players. I've said that before, and I truly believe it. Such a good defensive player, press-resistant, even popped up with goals, cut himself the goal in the Champions League final, and I don't use the word world-class lightly. He's a world-class player. The first defender is Kieran Trippier, who just keeps getting better. He was a huge part of Newcastle qualifying for the Champions League. all of their attacking threat basically came down that right-hand side, and Trippier was a huge part of it. He played in every game last season and was the constant that allowed Isaac and Wilson to really show off their talents. And for him to be an English right-back who's standing out in an era with Trent Alexander-Arnold, Reece James, and Kyle Walker just speaks to the talent that he has. Great player, Trippier. Then we have John Stones, who may be one of my favorite players in the world right now. Last season, he played a new position, one that we hadn't seen before, as a inverted center back, a false center back. I don't even know what you'd call it. He'd be a center back out of possession, but when Man City would have the ball, he'd step into the midfield, and he was great, one of the best players in the Champions League final. Great defensively, really strong in possession, and made that new position his own. I don't know if you can call him world class, because we don't really have a standard for that position, but in a team with De Bruyne, Haaland, Rodri, and Ruben Dias, he was arguably the most crucial player to Man City's success, and I think he's edging closer to an all-time great status. He's a truly special player. Then there's William Saliba, and I think he's one of the rare players who made the Team of the Year not because of what he did on the field, but because of what happened when he was off the field. Arsenal went from league leaders with Saliba to not even challenging Man City when he went down. He was so important to their success, and when they lost him, everything fell apart. Monster defensively, really good on the ball as well, and another good young player for this Arsenal team to have. Arteta's got a good squad for the future, and they might be able to challenge Pep's Man City sooner rather than later. They have a really talented team there. Last defender is Ruben Dias, and he's a player who transformed Man City the second he arrived. He was the bedrock that they've built these last few years off of, such a crucial player for them, and it says a lot that they've only dominated the league since he's arrived. And I think when you look at how good he's been for so long, he's become the real standard for top defenders in the Premier League, taking that spot from Virgil van Dijk. And if he has a few more good seasons, I think you start challenging for John Terry and Rio Ferdinand's spot as the best Premier League center back of all time, and just a really good defender who's crucial for Man City. The last spot in goal is Aaron Ramsdale for Arsenal, and that's the only real question mark I have in this team. I mean, he was good for Arsenal, but he was just good. And when you look at some more advanced goalkeeping numbers, he really didn't stand out, though I'm not sure how reliable those are. But the main thing for me is Arsenal just brought in Raya, and whether that's to compete with Ramsdale to try to drive him to do better, or to just eventually replace him, we'll have to see, but it's not something that Liverpool would do for Alisson, Man City would do for Ederson, or Newcastle would do with Nick Pope with how good he's been recently. I mean, Ramsdale, he's still a good player, don't get me wrong, but I just don't think he deserves this spot in the team of the season. And a couple more nitpicks to talk about. I think that Mohamed Salah will feel a bit hard done by. His numbers were better than Bukayo Saka, but Salah's pressing and Liverpool as a whole did really fall off last season, while Saka was a huge part of Arsenal's system, so I can justify keeping Saka in the team. Same with him over Marcus Rashford, who's another player who had a good year. Then in defense, I think all the defenders were really good, really special group of players, but outside of Trippier, a lot of them missed 10-plus games, so maybe somebody like Sven Botman could make the team for consistency, but I think quality-wise, we have the best four. That's my thoughts on the PFA Team of the season, and outside of Ramsdale at goalkeeper, I think it's a really good group of players. I think they did a good job with the selection, and took a long time to come out, but they used their time well. They came with a really good team. And yeah, really good to celebrate those players. That's all I got to talk about. See ya.